The day my husband asked me to come into the kitchen after my surgery was supposed to be the day I finally started healing. Instead, it became the day my entire life cracked open. As I stood in the hallway of our small home outside Portland, Oregon, my stitches still burned beneath my sweater. My doctor had warned me to avoid stress for a few weeks. I almost laughed thinking about it now. Stress had already moved into my house months earlier. "Ivy," my husband called softly, "can you come here? We need to talk." There was something different about Ethan's voice. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It sounded like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. I walked into the kitchen slowly, gripping the doorway for support. Ethan stood beside the window, hands resting on the counter. His face looked older than his 48 years. The heart attack he had suffered only 3 weeks before had left him thinner and quieter. For 20 years, I believed I knew every piece of this man. Now I wasn't so sure. He looked at me for a long moment. "I have hidden something from you for 14 years. My heart stopped. 14 years. Exactly the number that had haunted me for months. Because 14 years ago was when strange things had started happening. Back then, I ignored them. Then they became impossible to ignore. I had found motel receipts tucked inside his jacket. Late-night phone calls he always answered outside. Cash withdrawals that never appeared in our budget notebook. Every October, he disappeared for one entire day without explanation. Whenever I asked, he smiled gently. "It's something I have to do alone." Those words had become poison inside my mind. Then came the birthday card. I wasn't snooping. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I had been looking for tax papers in his desk when a colourful envelope slipped onto the floor. Inside, written in careful handwriting, were words I could never forget. "Happy birthday, Dad. Thank you for never giving up on me." There was no name, only a small heart drawn beneath the message. I remember sitting on the office floor for nearly an hour, unable to breathe. "Dad." The word echoed through my head every night afterward. We had never been able to have children. Years of fertility treatments. Years of hope. Years of disappointment. Eventually, we accepted that our family would always be just the two of us. Or so I believed. Then, 6 weeks before Ethan's heart attack, I saw something that shattered whatever trust I still had. I was driving home from school after preparing my classroom for the new semester. I taught 4th grade, and my students always said I smiled too much. That afternoon I wasn't smiling. Traffic stopped near a shopping plaza. As I waited, I looked across the street. There was Ethan. He wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a young woman, maybe 18 or 19. She threw her arms around him. He hugged her back the way fathers hug daughters. Then he handed her a wrapped gift. She kissed his cheek. My stomach turned into ice. I wanted to confront him immediately. Instead, I drove away before he could see me. That night, he cooked my favorite pasta. He asked about my day. He kissed my forehead before bed. He acted exactly like the man I had loved for 20 years. I lay awake beside him, wondering if I had spent 2 decades married to a stranger. His heart attack happened 4 days later. Every accusation died inside me as I sat beside his hospital bed, praying he would survive. Now he had survived, and he was finally ready to tell me the truth. I lowered myself into a chair. My hands trembled. "So," I whispered, forcing the words out, "tell me about your other family." Ethan closed his eyes. When he opened them again, tears were already running down his face. "Ivy," he said quietly, "you've guessed almost everything wrong." I stared at Ethan without blinking. The silence between us felt heavier than the walls around us. "What do you mean?" I whispered. He pulled a worn leather folder from the kitchen cabinet. His hands shook as he placed it on the table. "You deserve every answer." I folded my arms across my chest, trying to protect what little remained of my heart. "Start talking." He nodded slowly. 14 years ago, before we met, I was engaged. The words hit me like another surgery without anesthesia. My fiancée, Rachel, died in a car accident just 2 months before our wedding. I swallowed hard. "I never told you because I buried that part of my life." He opened the folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, photographs, and legal papers. Rachel had a younger sister named Emma. She was only 6 years old when their parents died. Rachel practically raised her. I looked down at one photograph. A smiling young woman stood beside a little girl with curly brown hair. When Rachel died, Ethan continued, Emma had no close relatives willing to care for her. She entered foster care. His voice cracked. I promised Rachel I would never abandon her little sister. I frowned. So, the girl I've been seeing is Emma. I blinked in disbelief. Not your daughter? He slowly shook his head. No. But why does she call you Dad? He smiled sadly. The first foster family treated her terribly. By the time she turned 12, she told me she couldn't remember what having a real family felt like. One afternoon, she asked if she could call me Dad. He looked at me with tear-filled eyes. I didn't have the heart to say no. Everything inside me began to shift. The motel? We met there because her therapist rented a private meeting room inside the hotel during family counseling sessions. The money? I've helped pay for her college, therapy, and apartment. The October trips? He stared out the window. That's the anniversary of Rachel's death. Every year he and Emma visited the cemetery together. The secret I had believed was an affair had really been grief. Years of quiet loyalty. Years of promises kept. I covered my mouth as tears rolled down my cheeks. I whispered. I know. I thought you had another woman. I realized that after my heart attack. He reached for my hand carefully. When I woke up in intensive care, I kept thinking, what if I died before telling you? You would spend the rest of your life believing I betrayed you. My anger disappeared. In its place came guilt. I'm so sorry. He squeezed my fingers. You had every reason to doubt me. I created the silence. He stood slowly and walked to another drawer. Inside was a stack of letters. I wrote one every birthday after Rachel died. Each envelope was addressed to Emma. Not with money, not with secrets. With encouragement, advice, hope. One letter read, You survived things no child should face. Don't let pain convince you that you are unworthy of love. Another ended, Families aren't always connected by blood. Sometimes they're built by promises people refuse to break. I couldn't stop crying. For months I had imagined revenge. I had planned to leave without saying goodbye. I had even spoken with a lawyer. Now every suspicion felt like another wound I had quietly inflicted on the man who loved me. A week later, there was a knock on our front door. When I opened it, a young woman stood there holding a bouquet of white lilies. She smiled nervously. You must be Ivy. I nodded. And you're Emma. She looked at Ethan with the same grateful smile I had mistaken for something forbidden. Thank you, she said softly, for loving the man who never stopped saving me. I stepped forward and hugged her before either of us could say another word. That afternoon, the three of us shared coffee, old photographs, and stories that should have been told years earlier. The truth hadn't destroyed my marriage. Silence almost had. That night, as Ethan and I watched the sunset from our porch, I rested my head on his shoulder. I've learned something, I said quietly. He smiled. What's that? The most dangerous lies aren't always the ones people tell. I intertwined my fingers with his. Sometimes they're the stories we create when we stop asking questions and start assuming the worst. He kissed my forehead. For the first time in 14 years, there were no more secrets between us. And somehow, the truth made our love stronger than it had ever been.